Good and welcome to our second Abracadabra webinar here today. On the line with us, a few very good speakers that will talk us through the different possibilities of utilizing some buildings to boost our retrofitting across Europe. Lineup of speakers ahead of us, including Sidon Pantelli, Julien Dijol, Anna Rita Ferrante, as well as Jorna Dragonetti, who will take us through different approaches and different ideas on how AdoRes can support property owners to activate the innovation of buildings, especially public buildings, and to support local governments' mitigation and resilience policies. My name is Giorgia Rambelli. I'm a coordinator for sustainable resilience, climate, and resources at ICLE Local Government for Sustainability, and a proud partner of the Abracadabra project. Seen by AdoRes that are mentioned in our program for today. Well, Abracadabra considers AdoRes to be volumetric add-ons that are combined together with renewable energy. They can be one or different units, for example, façade additions, rooftop extension, or even any other kind of new building construction. That AdoRes can save both private and public resources, and they can really support local energy savings and create a cost-virtuous cycle that can boost retrofitting across Europe. The idea of today is specifically to focus on the role that this can play in terms of supporting property owners and social housing providers and different public authorities across Europe. Among the questions we want to ask ourselves today, how can property owners and social housing providers find the value in investing and developing these AdoRes? What steps local authority set in order to the roadmap for public and private buildings utilizing these kind of strategies? So without any further ado, I'd like to give the floor to our first speaker of the day, the coordinator of the Abracadabra project, who will give us the opportunity to understand more in depth what Abracadabra is trying to do, and will set the scene for a great discussion for our webinar today. Sarita, I'm passing all, and I want you to take the floor today.
Can you hear me?
We can just fine, Anna Rita. Thank you very much. We look forward to your presentation.
I'm going to present, let's say, a brief introduction on the project. I'm sorry for the ones that have already assisted to this maybe introductory session of the project Abracadabra. I think that maybe the event can be registered and maybe new people would hear of the Abracadabra and its strategy for the first time. Let's proceed with the first slide of the large consortium, as you can see from this second slide. And yes, the idea is to gather different kind of stakeholders, also represented by the stakeholders and the consortium member of the Abracadabra project, and gather together to find new ways for activate the market of deep renovation in Europe. So the project is, of course, about deep renovation of existing buildings, and the problems in a deep renovation is that there is a very low rate of renovation in Europe. This is due to many factors, and we know that 20% of buildings that we see today will still be standing occupied in 2050. So the idea of the project is to leverage the rate of this renovation, which is a market that, for example, only in Italy covers about 1 million buildings. And the most challenging aspect is that we are dealing of course, on existing buildings where the renovation is very expensive. So the idea for the Abracadabra strategy is to add an added value to the existing building by this kind of add-ons that we called as the, let's say, whole combining the mission and the renewable energy sources connected to this addition or with the adjacent buildings to reduce the payback time energy retrofitting cost. So we see that we are facing the problem of this degree of risk in energy renovation and the long payback times. But we also like to deal about the general invisibility benefit options. So that's why we cross the idea of creating assistant buildings that can be added to the existing building context to can develop the actual buildings up to zero energy, activating in this way a market for deep renovation. And so the idea of the assistant building giving such a magic opportunity to the all existing buildings. So the aim is to create these new AdoRes additions that are, as I just illustrated before, a combination of renewable energy sources and new building to create a sort of synergy about new and old. To do this, we have to involve main stakeholders. Main stakeholders can be summed up into main categories: market actors and policymakers. So we are going to create the conditions to give policymakers and public, let's say, in general, the environmental and social benefits from energy savings and energy efficiency. While at the same time, in parallel, we are going to try to produce an economic profit and an added value for the market actors and the financial, let's say, decision makers in general. This is done by the combination of deep renovation and AdoRes strategy. Next slide. I illustrated just in the introduction. This is, let's say, a sort of very simple diagrammatic hypothesis. So we take the standard renovation as the entry level, let's say, and then on this entry level we combine ground, top, façade, and façade addition as possibility on the existing building, or mention on the existing building, and as a let's say more radical option, we have the possibility of add an assistant building as a brand new building, creating this synergy between the all. We just estimated for the cost for our tools, the possible renovation on the existing building that you see here on the left, and the possible construction packages as well for the new buildings. So we just estimated cost for both categories. This was done in order to achieve, let's say, a normalized cost per square meters and make it running in our toolkit. This part will be illustrated later on for the case of Archer, Reggio Emilia, and other cases. So here we see the main stakeholder of the project. So in the center we have the direct stakeholders that are represented by private owners, landlords, construction company, and architects. We have the less but anyway very much involved in the process, public bodies, ESCO company, financial sector, and the research building sector, indeed, which is the most indirect, maybe, stakeholder in this frame, but we consider it as a super partner, let's say, that gives the right and the fair opportunity both public sectors and ESCO or construction company investors. There are still open questions for policy recommendation in the Abracadabra strategy. We know that we have to deal with social measures and environmental measures that has to deal with the urban powers, the soil permeability increase, the energy renovation for counterbalancing the measures that we are going to face for the economic profit of the investment. Dealing with existing context, of course, we have to face the problem of additional neighborhood services and to guarantee that these services will function in any case, both with different behavioral maybe suggestion for the context that with additional with a parking area. So what we just mentioned in the slide, we need to integrate energy saving and renewable energy sources in existing situations. So we have to face the main question: how AdoRes could enter the building construction market and present a widespread prefabricated technology, not necessarily prefabricated, but a technology to be used in energy renovation of existing buildings. There are several factors that we have to face. We're going to consider the multiple aspects on different requirements that we can have in this context, social factors, and let's say tailorization of the solution with respect to the users, and seismic and aesthetic improvement as well, especially for the facade addition of the strategy that we have developed. Of course, this kind of transformation are high-cost transformation, so there are upfront costs that are required, and they are also usually higher than standard renovation cost, but of course they will produce a profit that will reduce the payback time in existing building renovation. To reach this objective, we have to focus on incentive schemes for the adoption of AdoRes, on the concept also of brand new energy plus building that used to renovate the old, increase the confidence in stakeholders and lower the risk for investors. This community at the beginning of the project, and we need, of course, to add more and more stakeholders. We already had response from France. In fact, the next international workshop will be held in Paris, 19-21 of September, next September, and plus we are going to collect letters of support from municipalities and from local stakeholders in order to enlarge our community as much as possible. That was already mentioned by Georgia. Enter the Abra community and join us in this very challenging project. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Narita, for your great introduction and for giving us so much food for thought. I would like to take the opportunity, since I have now the microphone, let's say, to the first one to kick off a discussion with you. I would like to ask you, the Abracadabra project has now been running for about 2 years. What would you think are the key bottlenecks that you have encountered in implementing strategy with the AdoRes across Europe? Just a couple of ideas of food for thought for our discussion.
I think that the main barriers resides in the public body, let's say, regulatory framework, because still we are facing a situation, and this is very, very hard, because this situation of barriers in the achievement of such a strategy are more evident in the southern country of Europe with respect to the northern country. And indeed, the southern part of Europe should be done that as in a way more more requirements for this kind of proposal, because it would increase the market.
Thank you very much. And with this, I would like to also remind all of our participants that you can send us your questions. You can either raise your hand clicking on the icon that you see right side of your screen, or through sending your question via chat. Please don't shy, make sure that you pin down all the burning questions, and we will make sure to read them. Now, from the barriers and the challenges, and from a great overview of what are the great achievements of Abracadabra so far, and the different tools that are being developed that Anarita gave to us, I would like to pass the ball, literally once again, to our next speaker of the day. I'll unmute you now, Mr. Spiridon Pantelis from the International Union of Property Owners. I'm sorry.
Good morning, Georgia.
Good morning. Good morning.
Do you hear me clearly?
I can hear you clearly, and we are looking forward to hear from you how to make a business case for property owners. The floor is yours, Spiridon.
Thank you. I'm Spiridon Pantelis from the International Union of Property Owners, based in Brussels. Today, present the perspective of property owners on building retrofits, and go through the outcome of our research on identifying the different obstacles that property owners might encounter considering a building retrofit with AdoRes concept. Select and compile all the information contained in this report, and resources have been used. First of all, grassroots and field experience, as well as knowledge coming from UI and its members. Research, information collected from Abracadabra reports and from our partners. And of course, some expertise, input and comments collected during the fifth round of the Nothings in 7 countries, plus the 5th international workshop organized by UIPI in Brussels about property owners' constraints. To sort those challenges and possible solutions, we have divided the different challenges in technical, legal, and financial related aspects. Social aspects are a central and cross-cutting element of this approach. Therefore, they are a transversal feature of this analysis. Yet, it is important to keep in mind that some of those aspects might be highly interlinked. For example, a technical or legal difficulty might have financial implications, and so on. So I will start with the legal ones. Among one of those of the most apparent barriers that property owners experience in relation to AdoRes, and Anarita also mentioned before, are legal and regulatory in nature. First of all, there is there's a general lack of knowledge on the regulatory framework surrounding AdoRes that discourages property owners to opt for building additions and renewables. Next, the heterogeneous and extremely diversified legal and regulatory frameworks add to the high level of complexity. In many cases, rigid urban planning legislations and bureaucratic procedures are posing a serious threat to potential AdoRes implementation. Often, planning and approval procedures entail a significant amount of bureaucratic effort and lengthy procedures which require, for example, the necessity to obtain special permits apart from those. Third, a significant part of the existing building stock in many member states is because of multi-apartment buildings, where decision-making rules on necessary majorities can be complex. Making a decision for energy retrofits in condominiums requires a majority higher than 50%, and in some countries 70% or even unanimity. And finally, the constraints are also found in tenancy rules. After renovation, landlords may not be allowed to increase rents, so the price of the house does not reflect the increased value of the property. Thing also that can discourage many property owners to renovate their property, as they perceive building renovation as a profitable investment. So going solutions that we identified, first of all, to cope with the lack of knowledge about regulatory framework, the most efficient way would be the establishment of one-stop shop models at the regional or local level, as this would ensure that local and regional specificities regarding the regulatory landscape are addressed. Further, it would enhance property owners' trust in having such knowledge of the legal obligations and implications regarding ADORes solutions to be able to take the decision to invest. So the strict land and planning laws, one of the solutions could be raising the national and regional and local authorities' awareness of the benefit of the ADORes strategy. The current bureaucratic and lengthy administrative procedures should be scrutinized and simplified to accommodate ADORes peculiarities. For instance, it was recently launched a campaign with the name Small is Beautiful, initiated by Solar Power Europe here in Brussels. This campaign aims at making policymakers aware of the increased complexity and administrative barriers that the new energy market directive will create for small-scale renewable energy producers. Moving to the next one, to facilitate more democracy in condominiums, online collaboration tools have sometimes proved an effective solution. And here I will mention two best practices. The one is Coach Co-Pro. It's an online collaborative tool that facilitates decision-making, bringing together property owners, local governments, and building professionals. Another good practice example can be found in France, where recent legislative changes in condominium law raised the majority rules. It's no longer necessary to obtain unanimity, building or selling the right to build on rooftops of multi-apartment buildings. In order to overcome the price cap, systems should be revised and include criteria that take into account the benefits of ADORes. Financial financial aspect actually, as was mentioned many times from our partners, is the highest ranking barriers for owners and co-owners when it comes to building renovation. First, high upfront cost and long payback periods is the main reason that discourages landlords for investing in energy retrofit. Many cities and landlords will not consider non-core investments that do not pay for themselves within 3 to 7 years. Second, lack of funding opportunities and inability to secure finance on acceptable terms is generally the most side barriers to investing in energy efficiency measures. Similarly, the market in most countries does not favor investments for energy retrofits. Others that have already one mortgage cannot take out another one, so finding it very hard to finance a retrofit in the case where these investments are profitable. Third place, there is a lack of tax advantages and tax deductibility of investments, and a clear driver for renovation work among property owners, something that has been many times during the national meetings. Extent to which energy efficiency and other sustainability features result in price increase will depend on the conditions within a given local market, and not one-size-fits-all formula for the relation between cost and value of the property. And the same applies for ADORes. If, for instance, somebody increases the floor space of a 2-bedroom apartment and one more bedroom, This will not entail a linear price increase if the local market demands a two-bedroom apartment instead of three. And finally, a very well-known and much discussed topic is the so-called split incentive dilemma, in which the main recipient of the benefit is not always the same party making the financial investment, which creates a disincentive to invest in the first place, meaning that the landlord makes the investment, but the tenant will enjoy the benefits of an energy-efficient house. The solution part, full solution. So it's in order to eliminate the high upfront costs. There are numbers of businesses that acquire their built on top of the existing buildings, and selling the new floors are able to finance the renovation of the old building. It's something that one of the principles of Ara and Anarita mentioned before. So as a response to long payback periods, it was proposed to identify AdoRes solutions that would have a maximum payback period of 7 years. Secondly, a solution to the limited funding opportunities. A suggested solution is to provide more advice about funding opportunities and, where possible, to consider project aggregation. For instance, instead of renovating just one building, to include also nearby ones where, of course, this is possible. As far as the taxation, it's suggested that the legal framework of such taxation should be revised to raise legal certainty, applicability in the case of AdoRes. A clear-cut legal framework would ease construction and financial planning, and with that contribute to potentially higher uptake by increasing legal certainty. Consider value drivers and peculiarities of the different local markets. A deeper understanding of local sub-market is needed to find customized solutions. For instance, two technically identical buildings may constitute a completely different business case, just because they belong in a different market. Incentive dilemma. There should be found a balance to fairly distribute benefits of an energy retrofit. For example, the law called energetic improvement in Germany, the landlords to increase the rent after energy renovation in an amount equal to the savings of the tenant. Or found that volunteer agreements like green leases can bridge the differences between landlords and tenants in a way that both parties can gain from an energy efficiency upgrade. Also, these benefits from AdoRes concept could also provide a solution to cope with a split incentive dilemma. For example, owners can generate income by selling the additional units, or also AdoRes is a way to reduce the common charges, since there will be more tenants to share the common expense of the building. So part of the identified challenges are of technical nature, and actually the purpose of this category of barriers is not to point out the technical difficulties during the construction phase, etc., as this can be done by another partner. Therefore, it aims to provide information of what is relevant when it comes to technological aspects for property owners. First of all, there is a high level of mistrust in the construction market, especially small and local regional markets. For many owners, considering a deep renovation, it might probably be the second largest investment in their lives after buying a house. As it was pointing out during the national meetings, individual homeowners and landlords do not know where and how to find reliable experts and professionals. And second is the mistrust towards new technologies, also as consumer acceptance, has been documented. It is due to a lack of knowledge about new technologies. This is so valid on how property owners might perceive the associated risks with AdoRes, as they may not be familiar with this type of renovation. Sadly, the lack of knowledge about available solutions is a major obstacle. This is particularly relevant for AdoRes solutions and energy efficiency related improvements. If architects and construction professionals do not propose solutions to include add-ons when renovation is planned, it is likely that the owner will consider such an option. Last place is, especially for the case of renovations, tend to have to relocate, increase this way the level of disturbance. Landlords from their side consider that they might have to bear the cost for rehousing the tenant, and of course not receiving any rent during the period of the constructions, so that increases the overall construction cost. On the to cope with low level of trust amongst building professionals, it was suggested the creation of a list of professionals that could be provided by neutral parties, such as public authorities, property owners, consumer associations, or one-stop shop structures. Regarding the lack of knowledge about available solutions, awareness raising and training activities on AdoRes solutions are suggested to make sure that the existence of such options reaches the owners through trusted and independent sources. Also, transparent and easy to understand information would far help people understand the available solutions and the AdoRes concept. Promotion of the Abracadabra technical toolkit, for example, to provide customized and tailored solutions for each building, is very relevant to ensure that the owner can visualize and assess the advantages of the proposed solutions and can take a documented decision, informed decision. And on the last aspect, as far as the vacancy cost during the renovation period, it's suggested to include vacancy cost in studies that assess the cost effectiveness of a renovation. Plug-and-play solutions are key to limit disturbance periods. It has been mentioned by project partners that AdoRes intervention in some cases can last as little as 1 week. There are barriers of legal, financial, and technical nature that owners are most likely to face when considering an AdoRes solution. On the legal framework and designing more flexible policies will considerably ease the initiation and implementation of AdoRes concept. Cooperation between financial institutions, construction market, and labor agents would help alleviate the risks of potential investments and identify beneficial cases. In transparency in the market and provision of reliable and customized advice, available solutions will help property owners take a more informed decision about AdoRes. Thank you. Yeah, that's part. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Spiridon, for the great presentation. Before we move on from the business case to real life cases, where we have Julien Dujol, who will give us an idea of some case studies from France and Sweden, I'd like to open the floor for questions to the audience. While the audience types down their questions, you have referred several times, Spiridon, to national meetings that have been taking place to discuss really the involvement of the property owners. Can you tell us a few words about some of the most interesting results? And I was mentioning before some differences according to the different countries that are involved into the project with sound barriers. Did you notice anything from this point of view, also concerning the engagement of property owners?
Indeed, we have gathered a lot of knowledge, and we have addressed the local specificities of the problem and of the barriers of property owners to AdoRes concept. Indeed, as Anarita mentioned, each country, there are different situations, and the barriers can quite from one country to the other. But upfront costs and the long payback periods are the most popular, you can say, that property owners face on building renovation in the most of the countries. Do you want me to brief you on what is the national meetings, or should I introduce what is it, or?
I think that would be a great idea. I mean, it already mentioned this idea of this community that is increasing, and of course we would like more and more of the possible stakeholders to join us in. So, of course, the invitation also goes to the people that are listening to us. So if you can say a few words, I think that would be very beneficial, because we want them to join us and to engage with us.
I think the local meetings in each country is very beneficial of gaining knowledge on the different barriers, because actually we to gather representatives from public bodies, financial institutions, property owners, and so our stakeholder community in each country is getting bigger and bigger, and more people can be on be at the same time on the table and discuss and the perspectives of AdoRes. And I think this is very has created a lot of knowledge and different perspectives that we're able to analyze and get deeper, and to know the deep the different obstacles that AdoRes concepts might encounter.
Thank you very much. So I've seen that there is one question.
Can I interrupt?
Sure.
I have a question, a suggestion in relation to what Spiridon just was illustrating, because I think that the idea of the vacancy building could be very interesting in case of renovation in a context, because we can use also this sort of vacancy building as a temporary building, hosting the users, hosting the doers of the renovating building, and afterwards they can be used in the concept of the assistant building for the strategy of Abracadabra. So maybe that where let's say land is available, well, there is a sort of boundary condition that can give the opportunity of the assistant builder that could be also used for the logical, logistic, and management of the timing problem related to the renovation and construction of new building. What do you think?
For sure, I totally agree with this, and we're trying to find different ways to mitigate these problems, and I think the vacancy building would be a good case to minimize the cost of the relocation costs and decrease the disturbance to the tenants.
Exactly. Thank you.
Thanks for the addition.
Thank you. Before we leave the floor to Julianne, I have a question coming from the audience. If the AdoRes strategy and have alone, how I deal with it if I want to sell my house. Just about, of course, the money, but also concerning the transferability of the property and the market value that it can have. In addition, how do you deal with that, not just in terms of selling, but also in terms of raising the amount of the rent for the people that are living in the building, especially when it comes to vulnerable population. Any from your side?
Thank you for the question. Actually, it has different dimensions. Actually, I will start selling the property. Of course, and unfortunately, there is not a single solution. As I mentioned before, each market is completely different. Even here in Brussels, from neighborhood to neighborhood, you can find different prices and different small markets that market rules apply. So, but before selling, before doing an AdoRes, it's better to consult with local property estate agents in order to insights of the local market. In some cases, AdoRes AdoRes can give real value into renovated buildings. Sometimes it can increase the rent as much as to reflect the investment that you made. So I think for when considering selling, it's better to know before investing. It's better to have the local intelligence of the real estate market. So how you increase the rent in vulnerable populations. Of course, this is an aspect that we have several times with our partners, and it's quite difficult to tell what happens in this case and how increase the rent if increase at the same time to increase the rent and in order to have your investment pay back, but at the time you might not the market might not able to this money for a more efficient building. Of course, the most optimal solution would be both to be able to host and energy efficient housing at the same time to be as affordable as possible. And yeah.
Thank you very much. And I also would like to invite all of the people listening to us at the moment to check out the different tools that the Abracadabra has been developing, as well as the policy recommendations that have been drafted, also in terms of supporting these kind of processes and to really engage also with different kinds of stakeholders, including property owners, and check whether AdoRes are a good solution for your own building. Thank you, Spiridon, once again. I will mute you, and I will give the floor to the next speaker. Jean Dijol is from Housing Europe. Jean, I will unmute you now. Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
And you?
Perfectly. Okay, so the floor is yours. Please just let me know when to change the slides, and I will be here assisting you.
So indeed, I will have now a presentation about the situation for the social housing sector. And indeed, when we talk about making the business case for property owners, social housing providers are very specific and very regulated property owners. So you will see there are some similarities with what Spiridon mentioned just before, but also some differences because social housing is indeed a very specific and regulated sub-housing market in a way. So the next slide, please. Indeed, what we're going to do is to have a look at 2 points. First of all, to have a look at some of the cases, some of these existing projects that have been done in relation to volumetric extensions, building extension, and secondly, we're going to have a discussion about policy recommendations. Those recommendations are only, in a way, draft recommendations based on the experience of Housing Europe members. Those recommendations will, of course, be discussed and improved and enriched by Abracadabra partners, first throughout the national meetings, and secondly at the occasion of the international workshop that Anna-Rita mentioned a bit earlier in September in Paris. So at the end of the Abracadabra project, we will have a set of policy recommendations specifically for social housing, where the objective is to inform housing providers, social housing providers, but also policy makers, including the regional authorities, to make sure they have a good idea about the challenges and solutions. And indeed, Spiridon mentioned some of the challenges related to the private property owners. The recommendations for social housing are a bit different, although you will see a lot of commonalities. So the next slide, please. So indeed, what I wanted to do first is to give you an idea of how social housing providers think about the extension nowadays. And I wanted to start with an example from Paris. Paris is a very interesting city because we know it's a high-dense city, and they need to build, but they don't have land to do it, and they need to bid also to build in a way, in an affordable way. They need to build it cheaply. So how they want to do that? And the first project I wanted to mention to you is just to give you an idea of the thinking. When you're a social housing provider, you think in a broader way, in a holistic way. You are also responsible for a whole neighborhood. And they did it by transforming a former military barracks called Caserne de Reuilly into a new social housing project, where they indeed add extensions on the site. And in that particular case, they used new system of heating based on geothermal and green district heating. So it's interesting that in that case it's not the add-on like the vertical one with PV on the roof, although they might do it in the future in some of the buildings, but it's a slightly different approach. But this approach is to give you an idea of how social housing providers think about extensions in terms of a solution, a global solution for not only energy renovation, but also in terms of neighborhood development. So the next slide, please. Do you hear me? Can you pass the next slide? Yes, thank you. So it's just very briefly an idea of the map of what has been done, but we're going to the next slide as well, because we're going to discuss about an extension project in per se. So please, can you put the next slide? Yeah. You see on the side of the screen the different extensions. So indeed, you see typically the old buildings, and in between the new buildings that will be add to that. So that's a specific form of add-on in a way, where we do side extensions, as opposed to preserve the architectural heritage or legacy. Can you please put the next, please? Yes. That's interesting, but the position of the new buildings, you see here on the right side the older building, and now in the middle the new buildings, and in the background the typical Parisian buildings. You see in the middle a garden has been created, so it gives also the idea that when there is a building extension, it's not only about energy efficiency, and sometimes it's not the primary factor, but it will be an addition to that. So the next slide, please. Now we're going to see a project where it's really about extension, let's say top. So they call it in Paris. They call it using the land in the sky. And it's building in densely populated areas where land is expensive. And indeed, there's the necessity in Paris, but in other big cities in Europe, to find a cheap land. And the cheapest land is the sky, in a way. So they call it using land in the sky, or sky as land. So you see here examples, and the next slide will be in more detail. This is an example in Paris, where they actually have decided to refurbish an existing building and to add units on top of it. So you can clearly see on the first picture on the top. So this is overall development where they will renovate existing buildings. They will create 72 new units, new elevators, and a whole refurbishment. The overall energy consumption of the building will go from label E to label B. So this is really a strong improvement. You see the total cost of renovation is about 34 million euros, and most of the extension is 18 million euros. Now, the big question that we ask each time through Abracadabra is whether or not the building extension, is a way or is something that will help to finance the renovation. And as we're going to see in the next slide, it's a big question mark. It's not easy to answer straightforward. So this is again some pictures. Idea. So yeah, indeed, the question is: could we finance the thermal measures for existing buildings without assistance, but with cross-subsidization of higher rent for the new buildings or sale of the new buildings? And other question is: if yes, at least can we preserve affordable rents in the new dwellings, or are the rent at market conditions economically necessary? It means that housing providers decide to do an extension of the building, will they be obliged, in a way, forced to rent their new dwellings at a level which is close to the market rent? Another question is: can extensions modify the business model of renovation in general in the long term? Are urban legislation stumbling block for the widespread use of building extensions? And indeed, we heard from Spiridon that indeed it might be a big obstacle. And can residents be involved in the design and implementation of building extension? How can resistance be dealt with? Indeed, I mean, we must be careful to, in a way, underestimate the fact people are not really always happy of having a building extension, and so there's a lot of work to do on that. So the next slide, please. What we know so far is that it's difficult to create a new business model around building extension, essentially because there are factors which increase the overall cost of work in the case of building extension. If you remember a bit earlier, one of the projects I mentioned to you, I mentioned the fact that they had to create new elevators.
I believe that Julien just lost his audio connection. I will try to restore his connection. In the meantime, I have another question from the audience, specifically to Anna Rita. The question is: what is the ideal size of a building when it comes to implementing AdoRes? AdoRes also work on single detached houses.
AdoRes works in every condition where the market has, let's say, is not very suffering. I mean, it's a strategy that it's always valid if we consider basic entry level, which is there's a difference between the cost of construction and the selling price or renting of the apartment. So the apartment or new parts of a building. So it's everywhere there is such a difference in between the two cost of construction and price.
Thank you. Yes.
The question, because there was the first part of the question that I didn't catch it properly. I guess.
Thank you very much. I will ask also the gentleman who sent us the question to please just confirm that that it was okay. In the meantime, I see that Julien is back with us. So I'm going to give him back the floor. And I'm unmuting you. Hello?
Yeah, yellow.
Yes, everything is working. No, we took the opportunity to discuss something else in the meantime. So back to your feedback slide.
Okay, you just share the screen indeed, because now I'm see it, but yeah, hold on. Anyway, I have it on my screen, so you can do it anyway. So I will continue indeed the feedback. Indeed, the big question is indeed whether there's a business model around building extension, and the experience so far is that it's not easy because you have overall you have extra cost of work in the case of building extension, and it's difficult in terms of socializing provider to calculate whether the extra costs of new construction. So indeed, if you look at the Paris example earlier, I mentioned the fact that the new construction cost is 18 million euros. So whether this new construction cost will in a way be compensated by or the renovation costs, 34 million euros, will be compensated by the higher rent or the sale to the tenants. As you can understand, when you are in the social housing sector, if you create new buildings, it's essentially to rent them, because in a city like Paris, there's a need to rent it. And in most cases, of course, they will adapt the rent, but still only. So there will be only a very slight increase of rent after the renovation. So the increased revenues created by the building extension is not necessarily going to compensate the cost of renovation overall. The big point from the point of view of a city like Paris is that because there are subsidies, and it must be clear that they have subsidies to do that, the overall comfort and performance of the building has been increased. So, I mean, a completely, in a way, sustainable business model around a building extension as a way to finance renovation, for the moment, is not there indeed. And maybe we will hear a little bit more with an example from Italy later on. But the feedback is that we need to work again. I mean, further work on that. However, densification and functional mix seems to be a necessity in many cities. So by that we mean that even though the business model is not there, building extension will continue to happen because there's a necessity to find affordable land or cheap land to build upon. There's a necessity to, in a way, accommodate for the new people coming in cities, in growing cities. And of many examples of cities that need to build new residential units, and they decide to do it on top of public buildings like schools, because it's a good way to do it, and it creates a functional mix. So that's in a way the feedback for a moment, but go into more detail through the national meetings and the international workshops. So if you can go on the next slide, please. This is the slide about recommendations. Well, there's basically six recommendations, and so we'll brief through them. So social housing providers, first of all, should systematically consider building extension as an option to create new rental units. It's also an option to improve the energy system and the insulation of the building and decrease the overall cost of living for tenants. I think this is a very important point. One example, countries like, again, France, but also Sweden, and I didn't have time to put Sweden here, but where the overall, so the building extension has been accompanied or combined with an improvement of the energy system, a new boiler, or also an extension and the creation of balconies, so or the creation of new communal spaces, common spaces in the building. So the building extension, it doesn't go alone. I mean, it comes with a lot of other elements which improve the overall quality of life of tenants. That's why it's a choice which is often made by socializing provider, although the business model for the renovation is not completely clear so far. Secondly, socializing providers should involve tenants in the decision-making process related to building extension and also the proper measures. For instance, I mentioned new conference room, terraces, balconies. Those measures have a direct effect on quality of life within the building, and they will compensate in a way for the inconvenience due to the works. The financial institutions should ensure that they provide loans or grants that can cover both the extension, strictly speaking, and the renovation. Indeed, sometimes a bank, public bank or private bank, they will give a loan for renovation and money for renovation, while the idea of the provider is also to do an extension. So the eligibility of works should be broad enough to cover the whole range of activities related to the project. And this is a quite important point, because administrative cost is quite high if you need to apply for two set of loans because of the two different types of activities. So slide, please. On the 4, public authorities should adapt their building codes in options to allow of the height of buildings. I mean, this is a quite renowned problem, and this is something that has been touched upon by Spiridon also earlier. I mean, in a city like Paris, obviously, but in many cities, the question of the maximum height of building is an important one. And of course, no one wants to live in tower, very big, high, and tall tower, like the one built in the 70s. Probably there's an optimal height of buildings. I mean, some studies say that it's between 7 and 20 stories. I mean, I'm not saying that this should be the case, but it seems that an optimal level of or height of buildings so that we can have a good density without having the problems linked to density. My public authority should consider to make public buildings with flat roof available for the creation of new residential units. I mentioned to you building on top of schools. We have good examples in Belgium and Flanders in particular, where social housing has been built on top of schools. So this is a case of building volumetric extension, but slightly different way. And again, because the idea is to find a good and cheap land to build on. And the number 6, the renovation and construction companies should provide for integrated solutions to building extension. For instance, lightweight wood construction and improved energy solutions for the entire buildings. I mean, it requires a different set of skills to build an extension in lightweight wood, and there's another one to do insulation of the façade or to change the boiler. But very often, housing providers, particularly social housing providers, they like to have as a partner a set of companies or a consortium of companies that can work together, or ideally a company which is able to do the whole thing. This will probably help to create a demand for extension. And I think this is a bit what Spiridon mentioned when they mentioned plug-and-play solutions, a package, a ready-to-use package. This is something that which is also valid for the socializing sector. So this is the last slide. Indeed, thank you very much, and sorry for the short interruption. And so that's indeed a very short overview of how social housing providers approach a building extension. This is clearly a solution, not only a solution for renovation and deep renovation, but also a solution for densification, for social mix, and in general for a better city. Thank you, and happy to have a discussion with you.
Thank you very much, Julien. Before I open the floor for question, I think I would like to maybe conclude with our last speaker of the day, Ms. Ioana Dragonetti. Ioana, the floor is yours. Ioana, can you hear us?
Did you hear me?
Yes, we can. Perfect. Okay, so last but not the least, a final speaker, Ioana Dragonetti. The floor is yours.
Good. I'm going to present you some of Abracadabra case studies focusing on the opportunities for property owners and the social housing sector. These case studies are owned by ACER, the social housing organization in Reggio Emilia area. And one is in the city of Reggio Emilia. It is an old residential building, is shaped with a common courtyard. The property regime is mixed. There are both owners and tenants from ACER of Reggio Emilia. The first of the study was a feasibility study of different add-ons. You can see this case was not possible to add a façade addition or an assistant building. Related the energy consumption before and after the deep renovation intervention. This is current state consumption heating season and the energy consumption after the deep renovation. We can see there is a reduction of the 40%. We did the payback time of different scenarios. This one is the deep renovation, and we can see how we have a payback time of 35 years. Top addition, being the study on the real estate market, we see how selling the new units we have a payback time of 20 years, and renting the units we have a payback time of 27 years. While the addition on a site with a higher number of new units to sell or to rent is reduced to 1 year in case of selling and 17 years in the case of renting. We have the value of the building rated differently for each scenario. How this is at the same time the most expensive one, but also the most profitable. We have a comparison of the payback time of selling and renting the different additions. And we pass to the second case study, that is in Bagnolo in Piano, of a series of social housing buildings owned by ACER Emilia, and some technical data about the building. The effectiveness analysis was based on a different assumption, considering the opportunity of renting and selling, also the renovated use. Study on the feasibility of the add-ons. In this case, we can have a façade addition that is an improvement to the original build. So interesting to see how the payback time is reduced, sell or renting these renovated units. Again, consumption analysis was the first step. These are the consumptions of state. And with renovation, we have a reduction of 45% of the energy of the prime energy index. And if we compare the payback time, we have 50 years for the deep renovation. What we think to sell the new units at top, and 19 years we think to rent those new units. We see the addition on façade. Have 1 year of payback time if we sell the renovated units, and 9 if we rent the renovated units with higher monthly cost. Comparison of the investment, and we saw the addition on façade is expensive, and it could be considered not convenient because it doesn't create new units to sell. If we look at the impact that it brings to the original building, it can be a very interesting option. Result brings to consider a combined scenario, addition on top plus addition on facade, with the most profitable and plausible option, which is units on top addition, including the renting of the renovated ones. In this, we'll have a payback time of 2 years, and this is a very interesting scenario in social housing buildings. Result is confirmed also considering the real estate increase, the real estate value increase of the building. Case study I want you to present is different from the others because it is a non-residential building. It is a student house, the property of University of Athens. Because of that, the strategy for the payback time calculation is different. Here are some of the building data. Again, to the feasibility of different add-ons. Now, in this case, for both the facade addition or facade addition. Again, some analysis. The different state energy needs for heating and domestic hot water. And the renovation intervention brings to a reduction of 42%. The time of the scenario were calculated, and we can see how for renovation we have 34 years. Well, on the destination use of the original building could be most likely new apartments, bedrooms to rent and not new units to sell. For this reason, the payback calculation was simulated with a different renting cost. The cost of 30 euros per square meters. For the top addition, we have a payback time of 4 years and of 3 years for the second addition. The value of the building and of the investment, the payback time, if the time changes based on different monthly rent costs. conclusions. The third results of the study. Different scenarios have been evaluated in order to investigate the feasibility of the intervention. There are different options to the payback time in energy retrofit operation. Payback times are significantly reduced to add-ons. This does not reduce the land permeability and be a strategy for open areas renovation, especially important in the social housing context. Abra is based for the rental market, even though this has been originally planned for the private property regime in existing residential sector, as illustrated in previous cases. But this is also effective in the rental market. This aspect is very important for the social housing sector, also considering a potential new paradigm, different destination of use. For example, temporary social use combined with other technologies like hotels. Issues to be discussed, such as regulatory aspects, agreed among the owners, tenants, or the tenants, and social housing aspects, like can the rent increase be a burden for the tenants? Could the solution having this increase balanced by savings in energy consumption? For example, a charges included rent. Their alternative solution can be foreseen, and the ESCO, a stakeholder for this type of investment. Not least, the Abracadabra strategy can be used also for public buildings. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Lorna. I would now to open the floor again for questions and use the last 10 minutes that we have of our time for discussion. What Lorna was presenting, I already received one question for Julien, actually. The audience is asking if there is a difference, in your opinion, between publicly owned social housing and private social housing in terms of addressing issues that we have discussed today, and specifically the potential of AdoRes. William.
No, you hear me? Yes, it's okay. Well, I mean, we don't make a difference between private socializing or public socializing. I mean, socializing providers are usually confronted with the same kind of rules in terms of allocation of housing, and also the fact that public authorities are setting some objectives, and social housing, be they public or private, not-for-profit, they have to know it. And for instance, in the scenario that Lorna presented, is very interesting indeed, that in terms of using payback time, building up and the new building, I can continue to rent the other part of the building is an interesting option. The only problem, the only limit is that as a social housing provider, you in general, I mean, it depends from one city or one country to another, but usually the public authority, they give you
lost once again in terms of microphone. So while we wait for him to come back on the line, I also have a question for Lorna. One of the attendees is asking about the skills required to whom is working in the sector of social housing. Your experience in these case studies, for example, do you think there are new kind of job types, kind of skills, or some updates for these people that are working in the sector that are needed?
I don't think so. I think there's no need to.
I think it's mainly a regulatory and process and management barrier, because we are dealing about the possibility of a mixed use of mixing different regime in order to have the selling, for example, helping the renovation and keeping on the renting rates for the existing buildings that apartments that are renovated. So I think it's much more a new skill, a new visions for a different paradigm in the stakeholders involved in the process. The municipalities, social housing providers, ESCO, and so on. More than a technical skill.
Very much. And in terms of users, is there anything that you think is particularly important to consider, not only retrofitting buildings in general, but even considering adopting your strategy for our building? All the speakers. To find users, the people who have it, the building themselves can guarantee the success of this kind of strategies and using this kind of buildings. Is it important? Not as important?
I think one important aspect, especially for the facade addition, is that it can be a comparative measures for in because we had the existing units, balconies, or the roof gardens. Also extra room for the houses, so they are open-minded to this approach. They will have also some benefits for the homes that are architectural and not only energetic.
Thank you very much. We have Julien back with us, so I will give him the floor again just to conclude his thought. Hi, please feel free.
Yeah, I don't know what you hear from me the last time I took the floor, but basically to the question whether there's a difference from private or social for public, to summarize, there's no difference. I mean, they are all subject to rules and regulations, and if the government decide to push them to sell their new dwellings to tenants, then the option mentioned by Lorna is very interesting. The fact that you build on top and you sell this part, and then you continue to rent the overall and the rest of the building, and you've done renovation, of course. That's an interesting part. But in some cities, social housing providers prefer to keep the new buildings in their portfolio because it's a rental income, and because they want to create also probably social mix if they increase slightly the rent. So really, it depends on the situation where social housing providers agree to sell or not their buildings.
Thank you very much. We're now really getting close to the end of our webinar, so I would like to invite all the attendees and all the panelists to whether they have any other burning question for your side. Last opportunity. Always more than happy to receive your questions also after this webinar, or should you be one of the lucky ones, they will have a chance to watch the video and the recording of this webinar in the future. Please feel free to contact us, of course, via our website. We'll definitely would like to thank all the speakers and all the attendees for participating, for sharing their thoughts with us, for being active in asking us questions, and for engaging with the Abracadabra project today. And thank you again to different panelists and for spending their time with us and share their insights and their thoughts. I would like to conclude with a heartfelt invitation to all of you that are listening to us today. I would like to invite you all to join our Abracadabra community that was already introduced by Anna-Rita earlier on today. It's really an opportunity to join this European network of stakeholders that want to boost building renovation through this innovative approach that we are promoting here using add-ons and renewable energy. We would like to invite you once again, housing cooperatives, policymakers, construction companies, property owners, all of you. It's very important that each one of these type of stakeholders brings the puzzle piece to our general framework so that we can find solutions to make sure that we have a more effective market for innovation in Europe for the future. I would like to invite you then to visit our project website. You can see the web address at the bottom of the slide, but most of all, to make sure that you make use of the different tools that are available to you, not only the toolkits that Abracadabra has been developing in terms of regulatory, technical, and financial toolkits that can support you in developing and to understand to what extent this kind of innovative strategy is applicable to your business. But also like to invite you again to participate into the different activities that we will be carrying out in next month. Spirito mentioned several times already all the national workshops that will be carried out in our target countries for the future. We invite you to join the community and to take part into these workshops, but also to join our next webinars. The coming one will be taking place at the end of September, beginning of October, and it will focus on financing these strategies and really digging more into the tools that have been toolkit have been developed by the project. So please mark this on your calendar and watch this space, because we look forward to, of course, sharing with you all that as well. Finally, I would like to invite you all to explore the opportunity to become one of the Abracadabra case studies. If you need to renovate a building and you want to learn more how to do it with our innovative approach, we are happy to give you all the information, and we are happy to support to see how this can happen through the Abracadabra approach. So please do not hesitate to contact us should you be interested in knowing more and to pitch your building for such a purpose. And if you are a local authority specifically, we would like you to join our local authority group and to support the process and look into how this innovative strategy can help you engage with our local government that has already started signing the engagement letter to support this as a strategy, as a valuable strategy for the future, and to support also the development of these policy recommendations that we are discussing. So do not miss the opportunity to engage with us. We look forward to hearing from you, and we hope, that we can discuss together how to make this market creation in Europe more active and more inclusive also of other strategies like the one that Abracadabra is finally proposing. We would like to close our webinar officially. Thanks again to all of you, and wish you all a lovely day.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.